after Krishna's departure was Lord Chaitanya's appearance, and the principal teaching, duty-wise, for Lord Chaitanya is, of course, chanting of the holy name. There's one biography of Lord Chaitanya's life that says when he, a little bit about the history of his life, yes? He was born in a Brahmin family, a very elevated Brahmin family. His father was a very celebrated Vaishnav, and his mother's father was one of the leading Vaishnavas of the whole land. And so he grew up, although they were Vaishnavas, he grew up in a very scholarly kind of pastime. Sanskrit grammar teacher, and super, he had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students. But during his lifetime, during his youth, there was a visit to the place where he and his family lived in Navadvip, where Vishwara Puri visited. And Ishwara Puri had written a book about Krishna. So he requested some service from this scholarly Nimai Pandit to examine his book. He would read it daily and he would hear, and if there were any errors, he asked him, please correct. So there were in short, no errors. There's some pastimes, but no errors. So he did some service and he got his association. Some years later, when he was traveling to Gaya to observe the Shraddha ceremony for his deceased father, he met Ishwara Puri again, and in an ecstatic exchange between them, he received Diksha from Ishwara Puri. And from that time forward, the scholarly pastimes made a complete transformation into a Vaishnav, an exalted Vaishnav, Lord Chaitanya. And it's said that when he was initiated for a week, every day, his spiritual master instructed him thoroughly on one verse, which is responsive to your question. Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Harer Nama Eva Kevalam. Kalo Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva Gatiranyata. The gati, or the goal, cannot be achieved by any other means, no other means than this one goal, or one activity to reach the goal. So Dharma has a purpose, and the purpose of Dharma is elevation to become civilized. Uncivilized is in a human form, but not human life. Human life begins when Dharma is accepted. And so within Bhagavad Gita, now we're going back and forth a little bit between Bhagavad Gita and Lord Chaitanya, there's stages of Dharma, because Bhagavad Gita is for people of this age of Kali. So in the earlier parts of Bhagavad Gita, we find Krishna teaching that the duty is always think of Krishna, perform prescribed duty. Mama nusmara yudhyacha. In Arjuna's case, fighting, he was a Kshatriya, yudhya. Engage in prescribed duties and always think of me. So the prescribed duty for that particular part of Bhagavad Gita was what Krishna wanted. And what Krishna wanted was according to his nature. Because as a Kshatriya, his duty was kshatriya, chat, trayate, to deliver from hurt or harm or to protect. Perform your duty. And for a kshatriya, it's to give protection. For a brahmana, it's something else. For a vaishya, it's something else. There's a swabhava. According to swabhava, one has duties. Kshatriya karma swabhavajam, Brahma karma swabhavajam, Vaishya karma. So according to one's swabhava, or the psychophysical makeup, there's duties. And the duty of a kshatriya is not the duty of a brahmana, and the duty of a brahmana is not the duty of a vaishya. And so there's duties that are according to psychophysical nature. And those duties are subordinate or targeted at elevation of consciousness. So that's one level of what is one's duty, to recognize psychophysical nature and act according to one's psychophysical nature. And then that's varna, and then there's ashram. So there's those two standards are standards of the varnashram system. That's varnashram dharma. Prabhupada's way of speaking about this is, if one doesn't follow, say it two ways. If one does not follow varnashram, they are not human yet. They're subhuman. They're not civilized. Or another way of saying, the Aryan group is not from a certain tract of land. Just hearing Prabhupada speaking about this, Hitler was crediting the German people to be Aryans. They just borrowed the term, but that's not what Aryan means. Aryan means spiritually elevated, because the purpose of Dharma is spiritual elevation, or elevation of consciousness. But so, at the end of Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita is for us, so there's different standards of yoga: karma, perform prescribed duty, and offer the results. That's karma yoga. So you can say that's duty. Perform prescribed duty, whatever your nature is, and offer the results to Krishna. So you're a householder and you have an occupation. So you do some work and your wife does some work, whatever that might be, supposing it's household duties. You do those as a sacrifice, madarpanam, from Bhagavad Gita. Yat karosi, yat dasnasi, yat jahosi dadasi, yat tapasyasi kaunteya, tat kurashva, madarpanam, arpanam. It's an offering of worship of Krishna. That's a duty. Whatever you do that for Krishna. You offer the results to Krishna. Don't be attached to the results. That's a duty. Perform duty without attachment and offer the results to Krishna. Then it goes up. Levels of an understanding of what duty is. And you can go through them, but the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, you must know by now, and that is 1866 Bhagavad Gita. Sarva dharmam prityaja mam ekam sharanam. So your duty is mam ekam, surrender to Krishna alone. Surrender to Krishna alone means no other shelters, material or associates, or let's say presiding, ruling personalities of the universe, the demigods, control this and that. They're subordinate to Krishna, so one takes shelter of Krishna alone. Mamekam sharanam. Both in terms of varna and ashram. And to help bring or elevate consciousness to that standard It's the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and to give further guidance to how you conduct the activities of life is hearing from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And to support both of those activities is sadhu sangha. You know the meaning, sadhu sangha. It's just association with devotees. So, summary. What is our duty in this age of Kali? We follow the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. That means we must know what it says. So we need to study it. An ideal in study is you study with a teacher who understands it and is good at applying it and helping others understand how to apply it. So guidance in the activities of life from Bhagavad Gita, and purification of the heart from the chanting of the holy name. And then from the chanting of the holy name flows other, like worship of a deity or etc. The other types of, or other forms of bhakti flow from the chanting of the holy name. And then so that those other forms of bhakti become enriched and elevated and purified on the strength of the chanting of the holy name. So the chanting of the holy name has some qualitative adjectives like attentively, regularly, etc. The duties of life have a goal. And we can say that, the earlier stages is become human or become civilized. Prabhupada would sometimes define Aryan means one who knows the progressive values of life. Progressive values of life, then that requires some elaboration, but spiritual elevation. What does spiritual elevation mean? It means connecting with Krishna. That which is the source of everything, connect with that. And become clear what the source of everything is and connect with that. Connect everything with that. See everything in relation to that, because everything is in relation to that. And then interact with everything in that consciousness that this is paraphernalia that is meant for Krishna's pleasure. Let me interact with this object that's meant for Krishna's pleasure, That's the duty of life. And one who lives one's life in that dutiful way, then the goal reaches higher than just becoming civilized or, a mature human entity or an Aryan. They become developed in Krishna, in consciousness of Krishna, or Krishna consciousness. In progressive stages. The progressive stages, they're identified. There's beginning, intermediate, and advanced stages. Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama stages. But the principle of duty is continue on that evolution of consciousness by the right means. Exactly what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. One who strives by right means is assured of success. So you need to know what the goal is, and you need to know what the means are, and be carefully guided. And that's duties. And it's the foremost of all the duties is this chanting of the holy name. And in the mood of carrying out the activities of life is take shelter of Krishna or surrender to Krishna. Dedicate oneself to pleasing Krishna in all spheres of life, social, interpersonal, career, family, civic, everything. Now, as consciousness becomes elevated, then it becomes a natural outcome, and as well as an expected outcome, that good conduct will follow. Sadachar, or Vaishnavachar, the character or activities, qualities of a Vaishnav. So one can say that's also a duty, to develop and cultivate the qualities of a Vaishnav. So then one needs to know what from your study group or various ways of Shastra, we come to know what the natural and elevated qualities of a Vaishnava are. And a really good place to begin is Bhagavad Gita in the 13th chapter. Krishna identifies a number of characteristics or qualities of a Vaishnava. Amanidvam, adambidvam, etc. And so once we know what a qualified Vaishnava looks like, we follow, we model ourselves after that. And if we find there's some shortcoming, we work on that shortcoming, particularly on the strength of chanting and the association of devotees that can help us overcome shortcomings in certain areas of character or conduct. And then we model it for our family and the community, and those are further descriptions of what our duty is, to model the life of an ideal human being. The ideal human being, the apex, is devotion to Krishna, and pure devotion to Krishna. So we strive for that. That's our duty. And again, to understand, well, what does that look like? And how close am I to that? Then that we have scriptures to help. That's the standard that we go by. And it's good to become familiar with them. So maybe you two in particular, because this topic was requested by you two, could you say further, other than what I've just described, some part of what I've described, what you'd like to hear further, or some questions about this topic in particular? Because I want to be responsive to what you want. Any thoughts or comments, or stir the topic a little further? No? You're good. Okay. Clear. What are the obstacles in achieving all of what I just said? That the duties for us in this age of Kali. What are the obstacles?
We are always bound to the material things, so that's the big obstacle.
We belong to the material things? Is that what you said?
We always attract to the
We're attracted to the material things. Definitely. That's an obstacle. What we've been discussing for about 4 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam, or maybe around 2 months, is that topic. Attraction to the temporary. I'll share a little bit, because it's an important obstacle to take a look at. You know who is Arjuna. So you may also know who is Uddhava. You know who is Uddhava? Arjuna is Krishna's cousin, right? Because Arjuna's mother and Krishna's father are brother and sister. So they're cousins. Krishna had another cousin, first cousin. Krishna's father had a brother. And his brother's son was Uddhava. So they were first cousins. And they were together more than Krishna and Arjuna were. Although Krishna and Arjuna were, often together. But sometimes Krishna was in Dwarka. Or sometimes Krishna was in Mathura, etc. And he wasn't always with Arjuna. But Uddhava was with Krishna always. They were very, very close. They even looked alike. They even dressed alike. And people, when they saw Uddhava, they thought it was Krishna. So much alike, lookalikes. Uddhava, being intimately associated with Krishna, knew Krishna's heart and his mind and his intentions, just because they were so close. When it was time for Krishna to end his pastimes, Uddhava knew. They were together in Dwarka. Uddhava, in a private place, went to see Krishna and said, "Please take me with you. When you leave, I won't be able to bear being in separation from you." And it was, he meant it. And then the second was, how can I understand you when I have this obstacle? And that is what you just mentioned, the temporary things, and I'm attached to them. No, he wasn't, but he was speaking as if he was, like he's one of us. And so Krishna gives very thorough, comprehensive explanations of how to overcome that obstacle. And in a nutshell, it's knowledge assists detachment. But knowledge alone is not enough, because knowledge doesn't act unless the heart wants what's on the other side of the attachment. That is to say, we have to be attached to, the heart becomes attached to something. So if you want to become attached to Krishna, and certainly Uddhava wanted to become attached to Krishna, that was the impetus to let go of the temporary and then take shelter of the eternal. So something that will help you make progress or fulfill the duties of a householder in this age of Kali, one of the best is to be very clear that the goal is to be connected to Krishna. This coming weekend, we're going to have a nice gathering in Chicago. We've been doing it for a number of years over the 4th of July weekend. We call it the Festival of the Holy Name. And one of the topics that I'm going to speak about is this one. But it's, from a different perspective. And if you can attend, virtually or however, you may be helpful. And something I'm accustomed to saying is like this: if we want to leave the house, best if we know where the exit is. The exit is most likely the same as the entrance. We all came into the house through that door. So when it's time to leave, we know how to leave because that's the door. Same. How do we come into this material condition to begin with? I mean, not like it's an event in time, but how did we get involved in the temporary and then attached to it? And if we can understand that one carefully, we'll understand how to get out. If we don't understand it carefully, we'll kind of linger for quite some time. Birth after birth, lingering, with some piety and some attraction for spiritual essence of life, but it will continue to linger until we understand how do we get here? And then, do I really want to become free from this circumstance? Or not just liberationist idea or salvationist idea or moksha idea, but higher than that is connected to the personality of Godhead. So the topic that I've given it a name, indifference. At the heart level, while there's some attraction for the temporary, there is insufficient attraction for the spiritual. Now, there's some attraction for the spiritual, but it's not sufficient. So therefore, the attraction for the temporary becomes stronger, and kind of like doesn't let go. Even we're striving to some degree towards the spiritual. It's not sufficiently strong. So we'll be discussing this. It's this indifference topic. It's a good topic to help us. Because the persons assembled here in your home, we're at different stages of our bhakti life. And some are here, and some are here, and some are there, and some are, different places. But the principle applies to all of us. There's some affinity for the spiritual, there's some affinity for the temporary, and it's hard to go beyond that. It's not, it's only true at this stage, and it's not true at that stage, or it's not true at that stage. It's true. There's affinity, and there's degrees of it, but it's so the behind it all is this indifference. It's how material affinity. Supposing you're in a neutral space. There's not like an absolutely neutral space, but supposing you're in a neutral space. How long can you stay neutral? And since all around us is the material energy, there's going to be naturally some attraction for the temporary. It's natural. And it becomes, we're quite familiar with it. It becomes, habitual. We don't like the unpleasant part that goes along with it, but we keep doing it because we're attracted to the temporary. Because we're not paying sufficient attention to the eternal. So a duty, and to overcome the obstacle of affinity for the temporary, is giving attention. This is a bhakti principle, giving attention to that indifference towards Krishna. Let's say even when you're reading, or even when you're chanting or doing spiritual activity, what to speak of the rest of the day and the rest of the week. The qualitative way in which is there indifference or its opposite when we're doing those activities. And then if we do them without indifference, but with some purposeful, at a heart level, the purposefulness of connecting with Krishna, connecting with the source of everything, connecting with the spiritual values of life, then the rest of our activities in life will become more spiritual. Same activities. You work and family and taking care of the house and whatever you do. The yad karoshi, yad asnasi, yad jahosi, tadasi yad. It doesn't just make an offering to Krishna. It becomes your life. At least the opportunity is there. As the opportunity is there to go from uncivilized to civilized, the opportunity of the civilized is to become elevated into the stage where we're actually making connection with the personality of Godhead. But complacency is kind of, I'm feeling okay. And so, what's the problem? Until the complacency invites Maya. That indifference invites attraction for the temporary again, which we're very accustomed to. So it's hard to go beyond that space. Welcome to the club. We have lots of company in the Sangha of practicing Vaishnavas. So the practitioners of Vaishnavas are a service that we can do for one another is to strengthen the attraction for Krishna specifically, and by strengthening the attraction for Krishna specifically, it enables one to see paraphernalia or stuff or God's creation or whatever as belonging to Him and meant for His pleasure, because that's the bhakti principle of life. So it's good if we can ourselves and help one another awaken that. That's why the sadhu sangha principle is so important. Okay. You want to add anything, Mataji? You're good. Okay. This is a simple topic. Anyone want to churn the topic further or add something or question something? Okay. Do we have a microphone?
Thanks, Maharaji, for that talk. My question is concerning Varnashrama Dharma.
Okay.
So in India, when we go to India, we see often that people, the system of Varna is very easy to follow. Like, you often do what your father did or what your family did. So it's just passed down through family lines.
Occupation-wise.
Occupation-wise, that's what I'm talking about. So like, for instance, a farmer's son will, most of the time, even nowadays, often still be a farmer. And that's changing a little bit. But in the US, it's almost completely different, where most people have a very different occupation from that of their father or mother. So how can the youth today find their occupation as it is proposed? Like the word, I think that we use in Sanatana Dharma is swadharma. So it's not just dharma, but it's also swadharma. So your occupational duty. How can we find that when it's not prescribed for us through our family line?
Well, prescribe. Kali Yuga, everything gets all jumbled. It's not just in the West. It increasingly will become more jumbled. But the principle of swadharma is swabhava. Just, from the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It's not elaborately discussed. It's more elaborately discussed in the Bhagavatam. But when you see this in yourself, you introspect, or with those that are guiding you, good friends and elders who you look up to, who can see these are the characteristics that are operating in my life. This is my swabhava. Now, if one wants to go, carefully by scriptural indication, which is wise, then there's indicators, or Prabhupada's word is characteristics, swabhava characteristics. Sama damak tapak shocham shantir arjavam evicha jnanam vigya. So those are the swabhava of a brahmana. So when you see somebody that has that swabhava, that it is indicative of what their varna is like. I'll give a little example. This is from the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. When he was growing up, his father died when he was very young, and so he was in the care of his grandfather. And he was, well educated. He was educated with the Tagore family, in the best of schools and so forth and so on. And when he graduated, there was a relative that placed him as a manager in his company. And one of the first things that happened when he was the manager of the company is he noted that there was a discrepancy. That was a customer was underpaid, or they had been overcharged. That was it. So he brought it to their attention that they were overcharged and paid them back. And the person who he was the manager of that company said, "You have the wrong profession. You should become a teacher." So he became a teacher, and then from that he became a lawyer, and then he became a judge, and because he had the adhikar, or the swabhava of a brahmana. He didn't have the swabhava of a vaishya. And if you're going to be a vaishya, you have to have a certain swabhava. So, if you're properly, it's for persons today. It's two things. It's all it's all jumbled up. It's not at all very clear, and it's not that that you're going to learn from your father. My father was an Ayurvedic doctor, and so I learned how to identify the herbs in the forest and take the herbs and make the medicines and mix them this way and that way and tell pulse. And I learned all that from my father because he's a doctor. So that became my profession. I learned from my father. So that's not going into farmer or whatever. It's not going on. So and therefore we have a lot of confusion. And I have a lot, career guidance for young people is really difficult. So, I've had young people say, when I go to a guidance counselor, the kind of advice I get is how much money I make if I do this and how much money I'll make if I do that. And so what kind of monetary standard do you want? And so I go for, I went for this. I'm not at all happy with this. But they did it because I was being encouraged because you'll make some money. Or well-intentioned parents these days in India, or the West, but certainly in India, go into IT because you'll make a good living, and they go into IT and then they don't like it. Some people like it. But lots of people find they're doing something for the wrong reasons. See, so there aren't wisdom people. What to speak of people that can guide them in accepting a profession like their parents. And then young people don't necessarily have the same swabhava as their parents. That's in Vedic culture as well. Sometimes, but sometimes not, or often, but sometimes not. So, career guidance is not easy. So something that's advisable is going on, at least in America, a whole lot, and that is apprenticeship. I just got a letter today from somebody that's in pre-med, and during this summer they have an internship, and it's in a certain field. And they thought they would like it. They found out they don't like it. But, it's just internship. They don't have to get strapped into a career they don't like, because now already they know they don't like it. but their supervisors saying, "Oh, you stay on another month, and you can do some publishing, and you get some, 5 stars after your name, and it'll help you go into whatever the career that you want to field that you want to go into." So they're going to do that, but they know that that's not a field they want to go in. Medicine and health, and so, so a lot of the learning is stumbling through apprenticeship. And what's it really like if I'm going to be an architect? Do apprenticing under an architect, and then there's different kinds of architecture, and so forth. I mean, I'm thinking of people that there's a lot of other obstacles. The millennial obstacle of using the phrase of millennials is make a difference or make an impact, and it's very idealistic and not so realistic. And that's a value. It's a good value, but how realistic is it? And if they don't reach their value, then they're going to be frustrated, and so they're frustrated. I mean, many are doing meaningful things for sure. A lot of it has to do with in modern. This is you hit a button that I have some strong feelings about. A lot has to do with parenting, and parenting where the parents see propensity, and they not like helicopter parents, but give facility to develop this, or develop that, or develop the other, and see where it goes. It's kind of like the Vedic model. One of the purports in the Bhagavatam I like is in Bhishma Dev's instructions to Yudhisthira, Canto 1, Chapter 9. There's a nice long purport where a teacher in the Vedic system would take on students, but they weren't necessarily from the same family as the teacher, and he would do two things. He would see what is their, they would train character, because that's for everybody. And then the second is see what their nature is. And according to their nature, he would give them training in some occupation. One teacher who was very skilled and could train them in this and that. And if there was some area that they weren't so capable in giving training, they would turn them over to another teacher that was. And the teacher would train them in that field from boys, from young age. And then secondarily was, are they attached or detached? And are they meant for household ashram? Or are they meant for brahmacharya ashram? And they would, engage them for a career that they could maintain themselves as a grahastha, if there was grahastha inclined. Anyway, so it was very much with a qualified teacher that had vast wisdom and lots of sensitivity. Not just, you learn the profession from your parents. No, that's for brahmanas and kshatriyas. Vaishyas had their own kind of schooling. And, like Krishna didn't go to school until he was 12. But there were brahmanas to guide them, as well as their parents. And their parents would consult with the brahmanas. The brahmanas would guide the parents, and the parents would assist their children. Even when, the varnashram system was more intact. So it's very complicated. So back, it's Kali Yuga, and it's very upside down and in disarray. So therefore, there's some fundamental things that a person growing up, persons that are parents and persons that are growing up, need to bear in mind. Given it's Kali Yuga, and as a parent, my son or daughter is not necessarily going to have an occupational inclination like mine, and that's just fine. And so, what is that occupational inclination, and what are those resources that can help them grow as they're learning something?
Thank you, Maharaj.
I was attending a program one time, very memorable exchange. I don't remember what the topic was. It was a new group of people, so it was a new topic kind of thing. And there was a little girl sitting right over here next to me, and she was like really tuned in, really alert. So at the end, just spontaneously, I turned to her and said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And she said, "A pediatrician." You know, when I was her age, I didn't even know what that word meant. And then I asked her, you have an idea what you want to be, a specialist kind of pediatrician? And she said, "Yeah, I want to be a da-da-da-da-da pediatrician." I said, "Wow." I said, "What about, a pediatrician that is always thinking of Krishna?" She said, "Yeah, that's it." No, I don't know what her parents, and I don't know what she's doing today, but having a tendency towards something helps, and then be ready to adjust what that tendency is according to your learning experiences and your exchanges with others. Anyone else? We're going to go online. Anything online?
Yes, Maharaj. There's one question from Apurva Anand Mataji. How do we get our basic desires fulfilled? I am talking about those necessities whose non-fulfillment are giving intolerable suffocation and pain.
I'm thinking three different things in response to this question. One is in practical terms, if there's something that any one of us find as a need, then generally there's some practical way to achieve that need, and you move down the path of whatever those practical things are to achieve that need. However, while doing that, the consciousness should be not "I'm going to achieve something," but "I'm going to depend upon Krishna and see what Krishna's plan is for the fulfillment of that need." And if it doesn't come, we continue in a reasonable way. And then, but this is what I'm speaking here now is a verse from the Isha, Nectar of Instruction. One should not over-endeavor. You make a reasonable effort, you depend on Krishna, and depending upon how Krishna reciprocates with that, you accept it. And it may look, how the reciprocation that comes from Krishna may look different than what you had in mind of what it should look like. I mean, just thinking about your question. I was tempted to say it, now I'm going to say it based on this question. When it was time to go to college, my father was very kind. We had a very close relationship. But, he didn't so much instruct me, but at one point in time, he, gently but firmly put his foot down. And he said, what do you plan to major in when you go to college? And I said, well, I was thinking to just have an undeclared major and explore a number of different fields and then decide in my sophomore year. And he said, I don't want you to go to college without having a career plan. And I was like, wow, that's not Dad. He just would be very understanding normally. So I thought about it, understanding, that's what he wants, and there must be some wisdom behind it. So I said, after thinking about it, I want to enter pre-med. I said, okay. And then when I entered pre-med, it was, I found things that I didn't like. One of the things I didn't like is I found people that were in their graduate level were cheating. They didn't do any work, and they made up some numbers as if they were doing a research project and to go out to the next level, and they just fudged the whole thing. And it was wasn't just occasionally. It was. I didn't want to be part of that. So I kind of pulled, and then, this apprentice thing, I started to realize, the ideal of helping people isn't really necessarily what medicine is. It's more about making money for the hospital or the clinic or whatever. You don't. Anyway, I by associating with those that were practicing doctors, I came to understand the bubble of the utopia idea isn't what really goes on. And that was my experience. And so that idea of being service-minded found another venue. This one. And then later, 25 years later, my sister showed me a family tree from my mother's side, and everybody was either a doctor or a teacher. So I realized that's my doctor or teacher thing that's hereditary, and that's what I'm doing. A spiritual doctor and teaching. It's not what I thought about when I was young. I want to become a sannyasi, Hare Krishna monk. But, it fits the nature. It's just by being genuine and Krishna sending opportunities and so on, how life moves. So, I feel very fortunate. Now, back to this other question. There was a need to be in service to others, and when you have a need, then the need can be met. And if it doesn't look like what you thought it was going to look like, that's quite okay, because human needs are reciprocated with by Krishna. And a second response to this question is Bir Krishna Maharaj, one of my sannyas god brothers, and a friend for a long time, he has become very interested in, not just interested in, he's become a teacher of nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication has an acronym, like everything does, NVC. And he teaches it in devotee communities. And he's teaching some devotees who are very close to me in this principle. And one of the principles of nonviolent communication is need-based. The teaching is need-based. If you're very clear what your needs are, you just communicate according to what your needs are. And you try to understand from others what their needs are. And to your capacity, be at least aware of their needs and reciprocate with their needs. And she's wanting your attention. So you, this devotee that's asking this question, can contact Bir Krishna Maharaj and find out what are some of the methods of seeing your needs and making strategies for your life for seeing to those needs. There's levels of needs. There's physical needs. You have to have food, and you have to have rest, and you have to have the social needs and emotional needs, and there's needs. And then you make some strategy and communicate accordingly. So Bir Krishna Maharaj will help you with some systems and methodologies for meeting needs. And, it's not exactly a separate one, but you have to be tolerant of, if my needs aren't met, that's okay. Some basic, I have oxygen. I can breathe. Anyway, there are some really core basic needs, and some people have difficulty when they have COVID, they can't breathe. That's a really serious thing. So count your blessings and be tolerant when some needs aren't being quickly met, or even after some sustained period of time, they're not being met. You learn to tolerate. Accept your lot of life that's come your way, because there's nothing you can do about certain things in life that just don't come. Something else?
Yes. Sanchari Dasi asks, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs accurate?
I have no idea. So this is a college question. I don't know what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are. I can't respond. She can ask Bir Krishna Maharaj. He might have an answer. Okay. Probably would say it's not so good.
Okay. The next part was, how would it be applied in spiritual life?
I don't know what the hierarchy of needs are. Next. That's it. Anything else in the room? Huh.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So today we have very interesting discussion on prescribed duties and Varnashram Dharma. So it reminds me about myself, Guru Maharaj, that when I was in my childhood, I was just pushed into IT. So that is not my
nature.
I mean, once I didn't know that, but once I joined the IT, then I realized that this is not my nature. But still today, I'm struggling with that kind of prescribed duty. So the question I'm asking is that, so when you're having prescribed duty that is not your nature, I'm not able to accept it, but still I'm continuing. So how do we?
It's too late. You have a wife and you have children, and you can't just, redirect things. You just accept that this is the consequence of, decisions that were made some time ago, or reasons that would, let's say, good intentioned people were encouraging you that way, but they weren't thinking about your nature, they were thinking about something else. And so then what you can do is, with your daughter, coach her in a way that doesn't, push her this way or that way, but see what her nature is and nurture. So find satisfaction in doing your caregiving to others. So that others, starting with your daughter, but with others, they have a sense of, not just I like it because that may be very flickering and fleeting, but more basic was what is your nature. And that, so the more you become spiritually grounded, or you could say Brahminically inclined, then you can see those things more readily, and you can give encouragement accordingly. There's not much you can do. It's too late.
And interestingly, my daughter also chose that same field.
Well, she may be following dad, but she may also be recognizing this is natural for me. And she's a smart girl. Particularly smart girl. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.